Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TKO podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Tausinga, and today's episode is called View from the Middle. If you're not entirely sure where you stand politically, or you're a bit tired from partisan bickering, this episode's for you. Joining us today, we have our guest, Joel Birano, as well as Dennis Randall. But before we get started, I'd like to pay tribute to Margarita Satini. Rita, as many of you know her, made a huge difference in the Polynesian community within Utah. Her death recently from COVID-19 was met with condolences from not just people within our own community, but also politicians throughout the state. And so we'd like to pay our condolences as well to her and her family, as well as her friends. And we'd like to express our gratitude for everything she's done for our community. And this episode is dedicated to her. In the spirit of doing so, I'd like to start with a quote that's been circulating the internet from Margarita. And it says the following: "The world you want requires you to be civically engaged." Once again, the world you want requires you to be civically engaged. We hope to help you guys not only become civically engaged if you're not already, but also know and understand what you feel in regards to the world you want, and also helping you discover your political identity if you haven't already. To help us, we have our two guests, so we'll start off with introductions. First, just introduce yourself and then tell us of a recent meme or viral video you've seen lately. It seems to be something that everyone's sharing these days, and then we'll go from there.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Joel Birano. I was born and raised in Hawaii, and currently reside with my husband in Washington State. He's a PhD student. We have 5 children, and they keep me very busy. Well, how old are they? I lose track all the time. 10, 7, 5, 2, almost 3, and 1. So yeah, I'm in the thick of, we're doing distance learning and all of that kind of thing. So I'm with my kids all day, every day, and trying to keep up with the political scene as well. So yeah, and as far as my favorite viral videos, I don't have a TikTok account, but I watch people reposting TikToks from other people, and it really sucks you in. I also am partial to like cute animal videos. I have a friend who always posts cute animal videos, so if I ever need to pick me up, I just go in and look at her Facebook feed. The most recent one she posted was like a little bulldog wearing like a sweater, but it was sitting in such a way that his front paws looked like arms, and it was running, and it was just like, I don't know. Maybe you have to have seen it to think it was funny, but I thought it was hilarious. So I love me some cute animal videos.
Nice. I'll see if I can get the link from you and put it in our description.
Yeah. I'll look it up.
All right, thank you.
All right, my turn?
Yes.
Well, I'm Dennis Randall. I'm sorry that my camera's not working and all you can see is my name. That's probably your advantage, though. I'm a retired high school teacher. I taught for 40 years. For close to 25 of those years, my favorite subject was advanced placement, U.S. government politics. I love it. And I still, in the summer, teach for the College Board workshops to high school teachers on how to teach that subject. And it's a lot of fun. Just as an interesting note, I know you're talking about your political perspective. The toughest task I have when I go out and teach high school teachers is convincing them, either conservative or liberal, that they can't teach conservative or liberal. You have to teach both sides and let the kids pick. And some of them get right mad at me. But in the end, they realize that teachers teach the middle. They make sure both sides are covered, and then the kids get to pick. That's just an interesting problem I run into that I think matches what you want to do here, Steve. I'll add that we have 18 grandchildren, 19 if I count my grandson-in-law. And we're just happy being retired.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And is there any interesting memes or viral videos lately?
There was one that showed up today on my Facebook account. And when I explain it, please don't misinterpret it as my political statement. I was just laughing so hard when I saw it that I shared it. But there was a guy sitting in a broken down car only the back end of the car, and a horse was pulling the car. And the caption underneath it was, "Is this the way Joe Biden will get rid of fossil fuels?" And I shared it not for the political statement, just for the absolute humor of the cartoon. I thought it was funny. I hope I haven't offended anybody by sharing it, but I just thought it was hilarious.
No, you're good. I think
Not at all.
people use satire quite a bit in politics lately, especially because we're a meme generation. I think everyone's turning into a meme generation now. Let's see, as we move forward, I wanted to share a quick story and kind of lead into a question about your guys' personal political identity and how you came to the conclusion of where you feel you stand. Not too long ago, me and my siblings, we were, well, actually, it was a while ago. We were younger and we were passing out pamphlets because my dad's friend was campaigning for some sort of office in Salt Lake City. And my little brother was passing out pamphlets in front of a building, and the guy we were actually campaigning for was walking right in front of him, and my brother went and gave him the pamphlet and said, "Hey, vote for so-and-so." And he goes, "Oh, why? Why should I vote for him?" And he goes, "I don't know, just vote for him." And then he just kind of went about his way. And the reason I bring up that story is because when we were younger, I was just kind of following my parents. But as I got older, I got to see where I stood instead of just saying, I just vote for that because my parents brought me to this conclusion. I was able to come to a conclusion on my own. And so the question I have for you guys is, what is your political alignment, and where do you feel that you're politically aligned in? And when did you realize that that's where you stood? We'll start with Dennis, then we'll go to Joel.
I think my alignment is middle to right, and I would call myself a moderate conservative. But the reality is, as with most of us, I sit on both sides of the fence. Oftentimes, people draw a line in the sand and they insist on standing on one side of the line. My upbringing, the way I was raised, and my culture taught me, we call it socialization in the classroom, but that's the way I was raised, and I still identify with that, and I'm still comfortable there. So I see the Constitution in a little strictly worded way. Others see it a little more loosely interpreted. But I think the reality is most of us are in the middle. And as an issue comes up, we make them, this is going to sound a little different than the first run through that we lost, but I think we make a mistake in our society when we insist that people stand on one side of the fence or the other. I honestly see good on both sides of the fence, and it's there. And I've often said the best way to argue with me being conservative, the best way to argue with a liberal is to sit down with a can of Diet Coke and laugh and tell jokes, talk about your feelings, and then stand up, disagree, and then stand up and walk away, go get another Diet Coke, and then sit down and watch a movie together. If we could do that, we'd be in great shape, because there is value on both sides of the fence. And we need to recognize that if we look, and I see a lot more good on the right side of the fence. Our grass is a little greener, but there's green grass on both sides of the fence. And the mistake people make when they try to identify their political ideology and their political comfort zone is they draw a line and refuse to cross it. That's a mistake. We shouldn't do that.
Thank you for that. Anything to add to that, Joel?
No, I mean, I agree. I think like you said, when we're actually in conversation with one another, and honestly, like in person is best, because doing it on, a social media platform, it just makes it really, really hard to read a person's facial expressions and body language and whatnot. And I think also we tend to have these conversations with perfect strangers that we have no feeling for or history with, so, but yeah, I 100% agree. I think that we are more alike than we are different. And it just it makes me a little sad that we can be so, tribal along political lines. So yeah, I appreciate what you said.
Thank you very much. So now that we're on the subject of civil discourse, I think it's appropriate for us to give it a test by talking about one of the most controversial issues this entire year, and that is racism. The question I want to pose specifically is this. Do you believe that there is racism in the criminal justice system? If so, how do you think it should be fixed? If not, why do you think so many people feel that way? We'll start with Joelle, and then we'll go on to Dennis.
This is a big topic. Obviously, this year has been kind of a year of reckoning, so to speak, for a lot of people, myself included. I think that we all have biases, that we are largely unaware of our biases. And I think that exists in our criminal justice system as well. And it becomes racism because when a lot of these people, when the majority of people who have these biases kind of end up working together, and maybe I want to believe that it's that it's not a conscious thing all the time. I think sometimes it does end up being conscious, but I think that, boots on the ground, I think a lot of people just want to do the right thing, but we're just unaware of our biases. And, and when it comes to like police officers, especially, like they're making life and death decisions all the time, and always having to be aware of their own safety, those biases can come out. And so I feel like a big, an important part of the conversation is to talk about our biases, understand that it doesn't make you a bad person to have biases, and identify them and become aware of them, so that when you are interacting with people, you're aware of your biases, but you're not letting them affect you. Like you're able to just kind of put them on the side and not have those lenses on. And maybe that might be like a real theoretical way of doing it, a theoretical idea. But I don't know. That's kind of where I think we need to start, is just having that conversation.
Awesome, thank you. We definitely have to kind of watch out for our own biases, and I know that those who work in the criminal justice system have those, and might be beneficial to help them to identify those and be better in their fields. What do you think, Dennis?
The question is there systemic racism in law enforcement? And I think that's the wrong question. The question is there systemic racism around us? And the answer is yes, it's there. I get real frustrated when I hear people on both sides of the political fence say, we need a new law. We need to pass these new laws. A law never once changed anybody's opinion, didn't change feelings. It may force them to behave a certain way, but the answer is just exactly what we've heard. It's talk. It's sit down, identify feelings, recognize those feelings, and deal with them and share together. Then we can solve it. When I teach AP government to teachers, we always have a unit on civil rights. And I always start by drawing a set of stairways on the board. I hope this is okay to share this. And I identify that the second step is discriminate, the third step is segregate, the fourth step is apartheid, and the fifth step is genocide. And we talk about what each one of those are. And then after a while, someone will ask, well, what's the first step? And I tell them, we can regulate these upper steps with law. We can't regulate the bottom step. They say, well, what is it? And so I'll write stereotype. And they'll look at it kind of funny, and I give them a chance to share times when they have been stereotyped. What does it feel like when someone stereotypes you? I had a young boy when I did that in class once at Copper Hills, where you were a student, Steve. He raised his hand and he said, "I know what it feels like." He said, "I asked a girl to go to prom, and when I went home, I told my mom who I asked, and she said, 'Isn't she a cheerleader?' I said, 'Yes.' His mom says, 'Well, cancel the date. You can't go with her. She's a cheerleader. We all know what they're like.'" And he said, "Is that a stereotype?" I said, "Yes, it is." And that's where it starts. We need to identify them. We need to admit they're there. We need to talk. We need to share. We need to get to know each other. I remember sitting in an airport waiting for a flight, and a little African-American girl came up to me. She was only about 5 or 6. I was sitting right next to her grandmother. She had a shirt on and it said, "Black is beautiful." And she walked up to me and she gave me this funny look and she said, "Is my shirt pretty?" And I smiled and said, "Your shirt is beautiful. But what's more important is so are you. Your shirt's telling the truth." She gave me this funny look and the grandmother looked at me and smiled and said, "Thank you very much." I said, "I mean it. You're a beautiful little girl." We don't do that enough with each other. We don't recognize the good in each other often enough. And the answer is dialogue. It's conversation. It's respect. And until we get there, all the laws in the world won't do us any good.
Thank you very much. I agree with the both of you. I feel like we need to improve communication between law enforcement and the community at large, especially minority groups. But to challenge thought a little bit more, I wanted to dive deeper into the concept of systemic racism, because I still feel like there are policies, procedures, as well as laws that systemically discriminate against certain groups of people, namely minority groups and Black people. I feel like the worst of these laws is the war on drugs. And let me explain why. I found an interesting statement not too long ago from John Ehrlichman, one of the founders of the war on drugs, top aide to Nixon. And he said in regards to the war on drugs, quote, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black." And he identifies that hippies and Black people were the worst enemy to them at the time. I continue the quote. "But by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did." And from one of the founders of the war on drugs, he says himself that they were targeting Black people. And instead of having a war on addiction to help them rise from those recidivism rates and rise from the addiction to those drugs, they created the war on drugs to keep them in the criminal justice system, to make it harder for them to come out of it and then to extend that generationally. And I feel like that's a systemic problem directly tied to a law. And I feel like those laws need to change, even if we improve dialogue between the minority community and law enforcement. So do we need to change those laws? What do you think, Dennis?
I do, but they're kind of ethereal. I get frustrated when a politician, either on the left or the right, it makes no difference because they both do it. When a politician will stand up and say, "We will fix this problem. I will introduce a law that will fix it." No, you won't. You may introduce a law, it won't fix it. But the police chief or the NAACP leader who makes an appointment one with the other and goes in and says, "Can we talk? Can we visit? Can I share my concerns?" That's where the solutions are going to come. If we can create civic dialogue between opposing forces, sit down at the table and share and identify concerns, we can make real progress. We won't make it when politicians promise us new laws, like the war on drugs, or we will fund or defund police by law. I think our civic leaders need to invite demographic groups in and talk. What are your feelings? What are your concerns? We hear you saying this. What have we done that's caused this feeling? How do we fix it? Those kinds of conversations can go a long way. And quite frankly, they start with you and I being willing to go to the city council meeting and in a very polite and calm way initially saying, "These are our concerns. What can we do to have our concerns heard?" And I think That's the beginning point. I also think that's the solution point. When we listen, recognize, I think change can come, but it won't come from Washington with the passage of a new law that simply restricts behavior but doesn't do a thing to address the feelings.
That makes sense. Definitely. I agree with that. I know my father worked in the police department. He founded the Metro Gang Unit in Salt Lake City, but he was also part of their PR team and worked with meeting various groups and getting the perspective of what they felt was important for their communities, and created that dialogue that led to cooperation. And I think I totally agree with what you said. What do you feel, Joelle?
You know, what you were saying, Dennis, reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend who lives in Richmond, Virginia. And I think it's a perfect illustration of what you're saying, that she, you know, after George Floyd died, the school board got together and had a meeting, or maybe it was just no, I think it was the whole district. And they asked the Black children, do you feel safer with the police presence that we have on campus? And the resounding response was, no, we feel targeted. And we feel like the police aren't here to protect us, that they're there to protect the white children. And the school board, to their credit, listened and said, okay, if that's how, and because, you know, I think it was like 50% Black or more. And they listened and they said, okay, we're going to hire therapists instead, you know, and everybody was okay with that. Everybody was happy with that. And it was just a real hopeful example to me of just what you're saying of, you know, leaders, you know, coming to the communities that they serve and just being like, okay, what's working, what's not working, and how can we fix that? I think a lot of work has to happen at that just micro local level. You know, sometimes, you know, the federal legislation is broad and sweeping, but it's kind of up to us in our small local communities to make things work for us, right? And how we live.
To start off this next question with a story from my childhood, just to add a little context. When I was in elementary, I had a friend named Tyson, and he would only color with his favorite colors, red and black. If you're coloring a picture of a volcano, perhaps it's very useful. When it comes to anything having to do with the ocean or a green forest or maybe dinosaurs, you were really limited. And in complete opposition to him, I had a friend, I can't remember her name, but she colored with all the colors in the crayon box. And she also knew how to shade very well for someone her age. And I just remember seeing a stark contrast in their capabilities based off of them limiting themselves. And so I kind of see American politics the same. It's very easy to say that it's just red and blue. It's just Democrat and Republican ideals, and just go straight off the platforms. But I think things are way more complex in American politics than that. Not only is there red and blue, but there's various shades of red and blue depending on whether you're moderate or whether you're extreme. It's purple in battleground states. It's yellow for constitutionalists. It's green for conservationists. It's rainbow colored for LGBTQ plus supporters, and then it's black for Black Lives Matter. You know, I think that there are so many different colors and so many different colorful opinions in regards to politics that it just really does us a disservice to not try to understand them all. It doesn't mean we have to use them all. It doesn't mean we don't have favorites. But I think it's important that we not throw away the other colors and keep all the other colors in the crayon box. So with that in mind, what are some aspects about other political parties that you may not be too affiliated with that you admire, and why?
So can I share a story?
Yes, go ahead.
And there are two, and both of these stories I think should be legends. One of them is Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah and Senator Ted Kennedy from Massachusetts. You could not find two people more polar opposite politically than those two. And yet, in the halls of the Senate, there were never two people who were better friends than those two. Ted Kennedy gave Orrin Hatch a great big large painting, and most people didn't even know Ted Kennedy painted. They ate in each other's homes. When one was sick, the other would come to visit. They became bosom buddies. As a consequence of that friendship, the willingness to overlook the differences allowed them to team up and write some powerful legislation, particularly legislation that dealt with children. And the Republicans couldn't understand why Orrin Hatch would buddy up to the enemy. And the Democrats felt the same about Ted. But those two seemingly political enemies became bosom buddies. They'd argue on the floor, but then they'd go and because they could identify the contribution of each other. And the other one is Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonia Scalia. They went on vacations together, families together. They became very close friends because they could respectfully disagree and recognize the good even when they stood on opposite sides. So it's hard for me to say that there's this thing I admire about the Democrats who should be my political enemy, but I can tell you some of my best friends are Democrats, not for that reason, just because they're friends. And the fact that we're different and we disagree does not in any way alter friendship. And I can't identify one thing. I can tell you that Dennis Edmonds, a vice principal at Copper Hills for a while, is about as passionate a liberal Democrat as you can be. And he and I have had some heated arguments, but always while we were laughing and always being, because he could see the good in me and I could see the good in him. And that willingness to respect crossed all the gaps. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And,
go ahead.
no, I think that's my take on it.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that very much on a personal level, that you're able to see what each has to offer, not just politically, but also, as friends, as family members, as fellow senators. They all see each other's value on a very personal basis, and that's a very good answer from you. You see not so much what the party has to offer, but what those individuals have to offer. And if I understand what you're saying, and I think that's beautiful. What's your take on that same question? You can go the same direction he did as well if you want.
Yeah, it's funny because I kind of was. I gotta be honest, like I don't spend a whole lot of time researching other, like especially smaller parties, but I do realize that there's a lot more diversity of thought than just straight red and blue. And I kind of am a little bit, not a little bit, but I'm skeptical of both, Democratic and Republican parties. Really, I think they're too big and too powerful. I think that it's kind of getting in the way of, just really being able to understand each other. But I can only really speak to my personal experience with people who think differently than me, and again, like it's I live in a college town. On campus is very liberal. Off campus, I live in a college town in the middle of a farming community. So on campus is very liberal, off campus is very conservative, and the people are wonderful here, and in our region is tends to be more conservative, but we've always been treated with respect and kindness, and you know, like, and I don't think anyone cares what our political ideologies are. People are just good to each other in general. You know, of course, there's problems wherever you go, but my own personal experience has been great, and I think that's been the case for, you know, most of my life. I think I'm struggling to think of a situation where I felt like truly hated or discriminated against. But yeah, again, like, I don't know, maybe party is the problem. Maybe we just need to, you know, I mean, that the labeling, I think is really difficult. Can just present a lot of problems, and there are lots of stereotyping that just comes with that, in and of itself. But I admire when politicians on both sides of the aisle show integrity. I really admired John McCain and the way that he ran his campaign. How he would even, you know, make an effort to check his constituents whenever they would say something that he saw as discriminatory. Yeah, and so I miss that, and I appreciate when our leaders in the country are, you know, have that civility, no matter, you know, where they align politically.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on other political ideologies that differ from your own. I'd like to transition on to the next subject, and that is refining out your own political ideologies. And my question is this: when have you changed your mind about a specific issue, and why?
I think maybe the most recent one would probably be abortion later in pregnancy. And when I first kind of, you know, read the headlines that came out about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But then I started to read stories of women who have needed that procedure, and it became clear that by and large, number one, it's really rare, and number two, no one's making that snap decision to have an abortion that late in their pregnancy. It's, you know, usually because of a medical issue. Not to say that it has not happened for reasons other than, you know, medically necessary, but it became clear to me that the government being involved in these sorts of situations is detrimental to everyone involved. And it's a very, you know, it's a very, very difficult and tender situation for the mother, and who is going through something really tragic and heartbreaking. And I was like, oh, okay, I can understand why we shouldn't legislate for these kinds of situations. So that's probably one that that I can think of in recent memory that I changed my view on.
Okay, thank you very much. How about you, Dennis?
I had my childhood. I'm 70, almost 72, Steve. That means the little girl in the Brown versus the Board of Education case, she and I are the same age. She would have been going to kindergarten and first grade the same year I did.
Wow.
That's the world I grew up in. And so I grew up as a kid knowing that African Americans were less than me. And people could provide a lot of reasons. And as a child, you just accept those things. As I got into high school and became friends with people who were different than me, I began to realize the falsehood of all of that. And as I've matured, I have come to my faith teaches me that everybody is a son or daughter of God. And I have not got the right to hate anybody. And it was an interesting transition from childhood to young adulthood to adulthood, as I began to recognize that those differences were artificial. They weren't real. Those differences are non-existent. Appearance is not a reason to judge anybody's behavior or their worth. And I have come passionately to believe, literally, that every man is my brother, every woman is my sister, and we are equal in my eyes and in the eyes of God. And that is a refreshing, wonderful transition that I have come to really, really appreciate.
Wow, that's a very powerful transition of thought, and I hope that those who are listening are able to gain really important lessons from someone who's been around during the civil rights era and seen the changes from then to now. That's which is a very profound lesson indeed. Now I want to move on to another question, which is who is someone who you feel is a good example of being civically engaged to you personally? So heroes, influencers worth following. I'll start by saying that I really felt like my parents. They both they work with the NAACP. They were able to push hate crime legislation. They were part of lobbying for many organizations with dealing with mental health. My mom worked with the disabilities law firm, and we were just always talking about like politics and issues. Even now, like right before, let's just like 2 days ago, me and my siblings were talking about our takes on various constitutional amendments in our voting ballot, and my mom, I was talking with her on Bluetooth while I was driving about one of those amendments as well. And it's just, we always talk about politics, and we've had heated times, and then we've all come to the conclusion that we all really very much care about people, just in different ways. And so they're like my heroes to me. What are some heroes in your guys' life in regards to being civically involved? We'll start with Joelle and then go to Dennis again.
Let me think. You know, I think the ones that have really inspired me lately are Hawaiian activists, not necessarily on the national stage, but people like Havani Rios and my mind is going blank right now. But what I appreciate about them is the environmental side of the activism, and also the spiritual side of their activism, connection to land. And I don't really get that as much in the wider national politics. Let's see. Some people I follow on Instagram, like Rosemary Card, you know, she's in Utah. I admire her. She talks a lot about how she changed her political views and how they've changed over time, and how she researches and comes to her own conclusions about things. Blair Imani, she does a lot of educating on just diversity and how we can be more respectful of people and not make assumptions about people, and ask questions and learn about one another. Brene Brown, she does get political, but her research is not political. And talking about shame and how we can come together. I think those are important conversations, no matter, you know, whether it's an election season or not. So yeah, I think those are a few that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, thank you very much. They seem to be a lot of folks that exercise critical thinking, cooperation with others. And then also I like how you brought up Hawaiian activism. Their love for the Aina, or the land, is very powerful. And it's something that I'm very proud of as being Hawaiian as well, that they have so much love and respect for the land. How about you, Dennis? Who are some of the people that you look to as heroes in regard?
One is a person you will never heard of. His name is Howard Barbin. He's been gone for quite a while, but when I got elected mayor in West Jordan, Howard was on the city council, and I got to know him. He was my age at that time, and I thought he was old, but I learned from him that public service is a powerful tool for good, and that ethics and high standards of conduct and honesty are a critical part of public service. One of the most ethical, honorable men I've ever known. He became a role model for me. And the other one, believe it or not, is Rosa Parks. What a powerful lady who saw a need to do something and did it with no hate. She engaged in an act of civil disobedience, knowing she'd be arrested, knowing that that was the only way to challenge the law, and did it with dignity and respect, with integrity, but with a firm resolve that she was right. And I think she set a standard for the way we can challenge that which we think needs to be challenged. And I have a great respect for her. Those are my two heroes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, those are, especially Rosa Parks. I know that's a hero that many of us share, but I like how the other examples you gave. And what remind me again, what was the name of the first person that you had shared?
It was Howard Barbin.
Howard Barbin. Okay, well, I didn't know him before, but now I do, and so I'm really happy you shared that. Now we're going to go on to one more segment, and that is the rapid fire questions. A lot of times, especially if you looked in the debates, like they have a hard time being brief about their stances on certain issues, and so I have 5 different issues that I'm going to do a rapid fire with. We'll start with Dennis, and then we'll go to Joelle. Then the next question we'll do Joelle and Dennis, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth in that manner. But if you can give what we call like an elevator pitch in the business world, which is explaining something in the same amount of time it takes to go from one floor to another in around 30 seconds. And so if you guys are ready, we'll start with Dennis and Joelle, and then I'll go on to the next question. So the first question is, what are your thoughts on the Supreme Court confirmation of Judge Barrett? We'll start with Dennis.
I think it was the politically correct thing to do for the president to appoint her. Now, whether he's Republican or Democrat doesn't matter. Obama did the right thing too. Even though we are months away from, or weeks away from an election in both cases, the president needs to fill the vacancy. Congress made a mistake 4 years ago when they didn't hold a hearing on President Obama's appointment, but it was the correct thing for any president to do, to fill the vacancy and move forward. That's a constitutional mandate.
Thank you. And then Joelle, what's your take on that?
I agree. I think Congress messed up with Merrick Garland, and for that reason, I feel bitter right now, even though it is the correct thing to do. That it's the president's right to fill that seat. I felt like it was, if a good faith move would have been to not fill the seat, but the correct thing was to fill the seat.
All right, and now we'll go on to the next issue, which is abortion, and want to hear what your stance is on that. We'll start with Joelle and then go to Dennis.
I hate abortion. I wish abortion wouldn't happen. But I do believe that abortions will go down when we have universal health care, free and easy access to birth control, support for the mother with paid maternity leave, family leave, job security for pregnant women in the workforce. And I believe that when we give her options and access to healthcare and sex education and all of those things put in place, that will naturally help the abortion rate to go down, which is, it already is going down. but I think that we just need more of those things.
Okay, thank you. And what do you think, Dennis?
I'm pro-life, and I make no bones about that. I am very, very pro-life. I do agree that we need to increase responsible education, particularly for the youth, to avoid the situations. But I am pro-life. I'm anti-abortion, and that's just a firm personal conviction.
Okay. On to the next issue, which is illegal immigration. What is your take on that, Dennis? And then we'll go to Joelle.
I hate the word illegal. We need to have an open door to welcome people into this country who come through the legal and proper channels and celebrate the fact that they have selected this country and welcome them with open arms. Those who seek to illegally or improperly cross the border, we need to restrict that. I have no ill feelings towards anyone, but if you're going to come into this country, you come the legal way, you fill out the application papers. Now, I recognize there are some legitimate refugees, and we need to figure out a cohesive, competent, fair way to screen those and assist them in escaping the oppression that they want to leave behind. But the flood of the cartels and others across the border have to be stopped.
Thank you. Okay, what's your take, Joelle?
I agree as well. I think that the United States should be open and welcoming to anybody who wants to come here and make a better life. I think it makes our country stronger. I am not, well, maybe I feel like I don't really have a problem with illegal, quote unquote, illegal immigration. Because sometimes I think that's the only option some people have. Would I like a competent and quick system for people who are trying to come into our country? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that it's, really going to happen anytime soon? I hope so, but I'm doubtful right now. So I think that if anyone does come into the country illegally, that we document them, that we, get them, legitimized within the country so that they can, have good jobs, that they have protection as laborers, as employees, that they're not taken advantage of in our country by employers who would seek to do that. So.
All right, thank you. And then we'll move on to the last issue, which is affordable education. And we'll start with Joelle and then go over to Dennis.
I think an educated society is good for our country. It's good for everyone. It doesn't help the economy if, like we're students ourselves, if a third of our paycheck is going to pay back student loans, which we're happy to do. But imagine if we didn't have to. That would be fantastic, and we could just, our full paychecks would be going to stimulating our economy. And I also think that it just creates a more civil and civilized society the more educated that we are. And I think that our country should see our citizenship as its most valuable and important asset, and we only become more valuable by being educated.
Okay, and then we'll go on to Dennis.
I think affordable education is a critical need. I am opposed to free education. I do not want education in colleges to become free, as some people are arguing, because there is great merit in working for what you get. Now, I'm not drawing a line in the sand, but I believe rather than student loans, student work grants, letting kids work on the campus part-time and being responsible in that way. Now, maybe that's the old man in me speaking, because that's the way I went through school, but I think there's great merit. The kid who works for the car appreciates it. The one that gets it free doesn't. So affordable, yes. Free, no.
Okay, and then actually I'm going to add one more, just kind of is in line with that, and that's affordable healthcare. If we could start with Dennis, and then we'll end with Joel.
We need to do something to make healthcare equitable. I have problems with the Affordable Care Act, particularly in the mandate that people have to buy insurance. Making it available, finding a way to make it less expensive is absolutely critical. I am not a fan of universal health care. I lived in England for 2 years. I experienced single provider, the government health care that they have in England. Our medical experiences there were terrible. Incompetent doctors. I know in Canada, we have a friend in Canada that waited 6 months for surgery. We need to find a way to make healthcare affordable and available, but not a universal single payer system.
Okay, and what's your take, Joel?
I believe access to healthcare is a human right. I don't think that anyone should be ruined financially for getting sick or injured, for requiring healthcare. I hear good things about, you know, Canada and England and other countries that have universal healthcare. So I support universal healthcare. I don't know if that would necessarily mean that all other private options need to go, but perhaps as a default, everyone be covered, just so that everyone has that as a baseline access of healthcare. Whether that makes it not universal healthcare anymore, I don't know. But I do think everyone should have that basic access to healthcare. Now, we've been in situations where we've been on government insurance and we have had private insurance, and it has been, you know, pretty smooth when we have been on government insurance. Choices have been limited though, in some ways. So, you know, maybe we need to allow for more choices when it comes to government healthcare and options as far as who to see as providers. But as far as getting access to healthcare, period, it's been completely fine. So I would just like to see expanded Medicare, really, I think.
Thank you very much for those brief and very precise answers. I think that modern day politicians can learn a lot from you guys, because you covered a lot of ground in a very short amount of time and went straight to the point, and I'm very grateful for it. As we move forward, I would like to bring attention to an interesting commercial I saw not too long ago between Spencer Cox and Chris Peterson, both running for governor in the state of Utah. It was interesting because they were both in the same commercial together. They each said that they wanted to win, but they said if the other should win, that they would support each other from across the aisle because they cared for Utah. And I thought that was amazing. I've never seen a commercial like that, to be honest. They also said that they want to set a precedence for how politics should be conducted throughout the United States, and I think they did a very good job with that. But it's just in direct opposition to a lot of those other commercials that are just mudslinging, name calling, hurling accusations, true or not. It's just very uncivil. And to see that, it really brought out great traits that I am attracted to in regards to who I want to vote for. So my question to you guys is, what are the traits that you look for in a representative when you're voting for them, and why?
I expect truthfulness, cool-headedness, someone who respects all of their constituents, and someone who's willing to listen to everyone's concerns and challenges and experiences, someone who's okay with being wrong, someone who has a good team around him or her that from different backgrounds and different perspectives, who can give them a really well-rounded idea of what is happening and what is the best way forward. And I expect leaders to be able to form good relationships with other leaders, other countries, etc. So.
Thanks, Joel. And how about you, Dennis?
I would just say amen to that. I expect dignity. I expect openness. I expect them to stand firm in their belief, but be willing to reach out. We call it across the aisle, but reach out to other people, involve them, show respect for both sides, and speak with a dignity and an honesty and in a way that even if you disagree, you recognize the integrity of the person delivering the speeches. I did not like Jimmy Carter's policies, but there's no way in the world you can dislike the man Jimmy Carter because you knew you were getting the straight scoop. I think the same of Ronald Reagan. Two people who were totally opposite, but when they communicated, when they talked to you, you could trust them because you knew of their integrity. I miss that. And we have it in our current governor. I disagree with him every now and then. But you know, he's a good and honest man, and he tells it the way he sees it, and he's willing to listen. And that's what I want. People who reach across the aisle, represent themselves, but respect others. I wish we had that again. I don't think we have it from either party right now in Washington.
Thank you very much. And I know that a lot of people feel the same way. And hopefully we could see more candidates come out in the future with those traits that you guys had explained. I'd like to end with an inspiring quote from the person that we had talked about at the beginning, Margarita Sattini, or Rita, as many people know her, who recently passed. And once again, hit that quote that we talked at first about, and that is, the world you want requires you to be civically engaged. Again, the world you want requires you to be civically engaged. I kind of want to hit on that part about the world you want. And my final question to you guys is, what future do you envision for America and your posterity? Once again, what future do you envision for America and your posterity? We'll start with Dennis, and then we'll end with Joel.
Wow. To be real candid, I envision great things. I think we are in a storm right now. I think that storm, the hatred and the anger that we see in both political parties right now, I think will pass. Because I think the goodness of the American people will rise to the surface. And once again, down the road, we will be able to shake hands, cooperate, and work together. I passionately believe that the goodness of America will prevail over the hatred of our partisan politics. We will win. I miss the days when we could raise barn walls together, when we could have quilting bees together, when we could work together despite our differences. That's still the heart of America. It will win.
Thank you very much. And then you, Joel.
I had to giggle because part of me was like, sovereignty for Hawaii. But for America, I hope for a place where everyone has a seat at the table, where we feel enriched by our differences, and where people feel free and able to pursue the lives that they want to live. That's what I hope for my children. And that's what I think can happen. I do believe that the majority of America is ready for coming together, that we are tired of fighting and all of these vicious back and forth attacking of one another. It's exhausting. I'm tired. And And I'm really just excited to come together, figure out how we can move forward.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to add to what you both said. Yeah, there is a lot of partisan fatigue, I think, as we see the bickering on both sides of the aisle. But I do have that belief and that faith that everyone can come together and work in unity. The things I see for the future of America is that there's going to be a lot of progress, right, and a lot of sharing is what I see. I hope that there's progress, that we continue to be captains of industry and invent and build new concepts, new ideas, whether that's on Earth or even if we expand to space. Like, I hope that we continue building and creating. And then I also hope that we continue and improve our ability to share, whether that's sharing and partaking in other people's and appreciating, other people's cultures and what they have to offer, but also sharing what we have, whether it comes from government funds that we collect through taxes, or whether people do it out of the goodness of their own heart. I just hope to see that sharing, that everyone is taken care of. That's something I hope for in the future. And I know that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, everybody, we care about each other. We care about each other in different ways, but fundamentally we care about each other. And I hope that feeling of camaraderie continues into the future. We'll open up with actually one last thing, and that is what message you have for new voters coming up this year. There's a lot of people who are registering to vote for the first time. Most of them are young, but some of them aren't. What's your message to them? And then we'll end from there. We'll start with Joel. We'll start with Dennis and then go to Joel. Go ahead.
I just have had this thought the whole time we've been talking. My advice to new voters is to forget Democrat and Republican. And start with a self-evaluation. These are my core values. This is what I believe. These are my hopes. These are my dreams. This is what I see. And then take that list and find a candidate that can match it. And look at the candidates rather than the party. So if you're a first voter, identify first who you are, and then find someone that kind of reflect it and go with them, regardless of party.
Thank you very much. Very powerful statement. And then you, Joel.
I would just add, vote.
Amen.
Amen. Go out there and vote. We'll be releasing this podcast, and hopefully those people who are deciding whether they should vote or not use that message and very simply said, go out there, vote. So I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much for not just having a civil dialogue with me, but with each other. I look up to both of you and all the opinions, not just here, but I see on social media, and I wish you guys the best in all your endeavors.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to call you Grandpa Fred from now on.
Okay. Please.
Sweet.
Grandpa's an honored title. I like it.